Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Uh, so it looks like we're going to Daled. I think we finished Gimel, did we?
Kavod Harav, I don't think we did the Shulchan Aruch.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think we are still in the Beit Yosef.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think there's a little piece in the tour over here to do. So it says here, so it says, right, at the time of the intercourse should be tsanua, right, modest, and also, right, enclosed, right, not in the open. Kedita benida, like it says in Nida, perk kolayad, this perk, right, dad dvarim hakadosh baruch hu sanan. So it says there that there's four things that Hashem hates. One of them is that somebody who has intercourse, right, while somebody is watching, right, and so that implies even like an animal. Okay, so in other words, if a person, let's say, has a pet, right? So the pet shouldn't be in the room while he's living with his wife there. So that's like right, even a pet. So all the more so if it's a human being. So okay, so it says here that these rabbis were stringent about this, so I'll tell you what it says here. So these rabbis were so stringent, they wouldn't even allow insects to be in the room when they're having relations. Right around the bed, בשעת תשמיש, at the time of the intercourse. הם היו מחמירים על עצמם. But he says this was a stringency, right? Because apparently, right, we're not that stringent in halacha to worry about insects. Okay. So, אמר לרב יהודה לשמואל, so רב יהודה tells שמואל, אפילו בפני עכברים, right, he says even mice, פירוש שאל לו על מה שאין לשמש מיטתו בפני כל חי, אם אסור אפילו בפני עכברים, אמר לא אלא כגון של בית פלוני שמשמשים מיטותיהם בפני עבדיהם, right? So he says, no, we're not really talking about mice, right? Not, that's not halacha. But he says, right, that what we are talking about is, let's say, if a person has a slave, so he shouldn't have relations when his slave is watching. Alma shemutar bifnei achbarim. So you see from there that mice is not a problem. Ela shehem ayu machmir al tzma. These rabbis were stringent though. Hilkach mutar bifnei behema v'chayav. So he says, therefore, right, it is allowed if there is an animal in the room, right? A mouse is an animal, right? What is it? So v'tinok kinami she'en yodea ledaber kebehema dameh. So he says also, if you have a child and he doesn't know how to speak yet, right? Too young to speak. So, it's still allowed. It's like an animal. And it says also when it's talking about, this issue, it's talking about that person, whatever, is awake, right? But if they're sleeping, it's okay. So he says there is a doubt whether you can suffice with a partition, right? With 10 tfachim, which is like up to the waist, So he says, right, it's logical to say that it doesn't really help. It's true. Even though it does rectify the situation when it comes to a Sefer Torah, but here it says, because the reason is because of modesty. So here it doesn't really help. Right? So why is that? Because after all, you can plainly see, over the partition, it's very short. It's only up to the waist, So then, what does it help you? So that's the reason why it doesn't go. And when it comes to Sefer Torah, it does help. It does work. Why is that? So the answer is that because Sefer Torah is not because of modesty, it's because of we want you to be in a different domain, right? We don't want you having intercourse in the same domain as the Sefer Torah. And once you make a partition, it is called a different domain, technically speaking, right? So therefore it's allowed. But we only allow that when there's no other choice. In other words, there's no other room to put the Sefer Torah. But if there is, you should move it to a different room. Proper thing to do. Okay, good. So let's go on. Let's see. Okay, I think we're done with the tour. We can go to Bet Yosef. Bet Yosef is really done also. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. Let's see what's going on there. Right, so it says here, "Ubarotim mikem hamordim haposhim bi." Right, so this pasuk, this verse, it's in Yechezkel, Kaf Lamed Chet. Right, what is it saying here? It's saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when He brings the Geulah, the redemption, what He's gonna do is, He's gonna punish the sinners, the ones who sin against God. These are like we're talking about habitual sinners. They don't stop. They're addicted to sin. People like this, right? So God says, Hashem says, I'm going to remove these people from you, from your midst, right? What does that mean? I'm going to destroy them, pretty much, right? I'm going to weed them out of your community. So says the Gemara there, right? Elu b'nei atisha midot. These are right. Who are these people that we're talking about, right? These are the Erev Rav, right? That were born because of these 9 things that we mentioned, right? The day before, this week. those 9 qualities. So if they were born from those 9 things, this is what they are, they're sinners, I mean, this is what you have. Unfortunately, So this is the last thing you want, right? You don't want this. Okay, yeah, that's right. So now it goes through them, right? Again, we're going to go through the list, right? We went through the long version. Now we'll go to the short version, right? Because we already know the definitions of these things, hopefully. So it says, right, again, Bnei Anusah, right? A woman who was raped, even if it's his wife, as we said. Bnei Sinu'ah, right? Then we have hatred, being between the spouses. Bnei Nidui, right? Then we said, right? So what is this? It's either Nida, right, or excommunication. Bnei Timurah, then we have Timurah, which is, you were thinking to do a sin, but you got lucky and you did not, right? You went with somebody who was allowed with you. You switched, right? Bnei Moredet, right? Then we have the right, the woman who's rebellious. So, right, we said, what does that mean? She tells you, right, I don't want you, Bnei Shichut, right? Then we have the drunk. Bnei Grushat Alev. Then we have, you decide to get divorced. Bnei Irvuvia, right? And then we have the Irvuvia. So that means that you were thinking about somebody else. And Chatzufa, as we said, right, that she propositions him, directly, right, without any filter. Speaks very directly about it. That's not what we want, right? Okay, very good. So that's the story there. So these are the things we want to avoid, especially as we said, right? Especially if you're having children, right? And the truth is, we said that even if you're not having children, it's not proper to have, relations with these kinds of conditions. So therefore, a person shouldn't do these things even if he's not having children. That was the conclusion in the Bet Yosef in the tour, because these things are severe. So a person who does this is called a sinner. Okay, that's very clear. So let's go to Dalet. So he brings here, right, the Bet Yosef, the language of the Ravad, right? That he wrote this book is called Shara Kedosha, right? The truth is the book is called Bale Nefesh, but this is like one of the sections, one of the sections of the book, one of the chapters. So what does it say there, right? We already started to speak about this yesterday, right? And our friend got a little bit right fidgy with us, last night, if you remember, right? He got a little bit nervous about that. So we'll talk about this now, right? And we'll have to go a little bit deeper into it to understand, right? Analyze the whole thing. So, כתב רעב"ד בשער הקדושה, right? He says that רעב"ד, המסתכלים באותו מקום עוברים בעצני לכת עם הולכך, right? So he says, right, that if you're looking, at the genitals of the woman, right? So you're transgressing what it says in Micha, right? You should go with your God in modesty. Uma'avirin abusha mi'al pneim, right? And also, right, in other words, he has no shame, he's kind of like shameless, kind of like a brazen person, that's what he's saying, right? Ukativ uba'avur tiyeh irato al pnechem. So it says there that you should have fear of God. Zo abusha lebilti techatau. So he says this is a shame, shekol mitbayesh eno choteh. So he says person who has shame, he doesn't come to sin, Only a shameless person comes to sin. וכל שכן הנושקים שיש בהם כל אלה, right? So it's all the more so if they kiss there, that's even worse. ועוד שעוברים על, right, בל תשחצות נפשותם. Also they're, right, transgressing another prohibition, which is, to defile themselves, whatever. וכתב עוד הרעב"ד, so it says the Ravad, בספר בעל נפש, right, in this book, ahad de'amur Rabbanan. So well, now we are going to analyze the Gemara, right? Because the truth is, in the Gemara, right, it doesn't seem to go like the Ravad. So we're going to see right now how this fits into this whole thing. So it says here, right, it says in Nedarim, Kaf Amud Aleph, כל המסתכל בעקבה של אישה, הביאן לבנים שאינם מגונגנים. Right, so it says that if a person looks, at the genitals, right, of the woman, you'll have children who are not fitting, not proper. So it says, you see from there, you're not allowed to look there. Even if it's his wife, so because whoever looks there doesn't have shame, no shame. So also he right, he also incites the evil inclination upon himself. Okay, so that's one thing, right? So we have to continue in the tour here to get the whole picture, right? There's a whole discussion here. So I'll go back to the tour and let's see what he says here. Okay, let's see. I don't see anything here in the tour. Okay, I don't see anything, but let's go back to Bet Yosef. It says here, he goes further, right? Tosfot Pirshut de Apichat Shulchan, right? So now he's talking about the issue of like anal intercourse, and because this also is mentioned in this Gemara. It must be here in the tour somewhere because otherwise he wouldn't be quoting this. I'm going to look again one more time. I'm sorry. It's Yeah, so actually the truth is we read this yesterday already, so I'm just going to go back to Bet Yosef. We read it, okay, whatever. So the point is, right, like this, that as we said, that Gemara in Nedarim, it talks over there about several things, that this Rabbi Yochanan ben Dehavai, he says, right, the angels told me that these things are not good to do, and because they cause blemishes in the children. So one of them, right, as we said, we already spoke about the issue of the oral sex. Now he's talking about the issue of anal sex. So there also, right, this rabbi got a tradition from these angels, right, that this is not good, and right, but right, there's different definitions of this. So according to Tosfot, right, what does it mean? As we said, right, we're talking about anal. The Sot Perek Arba Achin, right, in the end of this Perek, Halalu Enam Ela Kemase Er Beonan. So he says, this is like Er Beonan, You guys know who it was Er Beonan?
Yes.
Who are they?
The sons of you weren't the first two sons of Yehuda. You know that
Right, these are sons of, yes, these are sons of Yehuda. So what happened was, right, that according to the right, the story there in the Chumash, that they died, both of them, and the reason was, right, because this is what they were doing, they were not doing normal intercourse, so why were they doing that? Because they didn't want to have children with this lady. Why wouldn't they want to have children? What's the problem? Anybody know?
They didn't want Tamar to lose her shape or something like that.
Right. So in other words, this lady was beautiful, Tamar. So that's why when you get pregnant, you get, like the body kind of like falls out of shape a little bit. So he wanted to preserve her figure, in the proper way, in the shape, So that's why he didn't want to get her pregnant. This is what he was doing. So therefore, he was doing the abnormal way, in order to avoid pregnancy. This is what they're saying over here. So Er died, right, because of that, and then Yehuda told Ornan to marry Tamar, as a levirate marriage, right? Yibum. When the brother dies, right, childless, so you have to do Yibum. So what happened was that Onan also was doing the same thing, right? Looks like, I don't know, but they must have been twin brothers, these two. I don't know what the problem is. They were doing the same thing, right? But Onan wasn't doing it for the same reason as Er. As they say, right? Er was doing it because to preserve her figure. But Onan was doing it because he knew that the child would not be called on his name. What does that mean? It will be associated with the first husband, with his brother. So he wasn't really keen on that, whatever. So he said, you know what? What do I need a child like that for? Like, what does it help me? It's not even mine, so it's like, I'm not interested in that. So he did the same thing, right? So they both died. Hashem killed both of them. So you see from here, right? The rabbis learned from this story many things, But one of them is that a person who spills this seed, in vain, it's a very big sin. He's liable to death, and it's like he's like a murderer, and so forth and so on, right? There's all kinds of, right? No, there's no end to all the things that they say about this. So this is the reason why we got to be careful with that, So what happens is, right, when you do it anal, you're spilling your seed. That's what you're doing, because it's not going in the right place. So that's what they're saying, right? That's what they were doing. Er and Onan. Okay, so right, that's what happened there, right? כלומר, הדש מפנים בזור בחוץ מסיק להווה כמעשה ער בעונן ולא כמעשה ער בעונן, ואילו הטעם שלא כדרכה ואחר כדרכה. Right, so he says, but it's not exactly the same thing. In other words, right, he's telling you the conclusion is that they were doing, they were spilling their seed outside. but they were not doing anal. But it's the same thing in terms of the halakha, whatever, something like that. So it says, right, that mashma the asur leshamesh derech, but so it implies here that you're not allowed to do that, right? The tema the pek sheni dinarim, but it says now we have another gemara, right, which seems to contradict this. Kaf amud bet aminan au deata lekama Rabbi, right? So there's a story over there in Nedarim, Kaf amud bet, right? There was this lady, right, who came to Rabbi Udanasi. Rabbi, we call him Rabbi, right? The Ashkenazim call him Rebbe. Right? I don't know where they got this Rebbe business from. It's like Yiddish, whatever. But it's not Rebbe, it's Rabbi. Okay, whatever, right? So anyway, right, he's my Rebbe, like they say, right? Ashkenazim, Right, so whatever, right? So anyway, so she came to Rabbi, and Rabbi was the Gadol Ador, he was a great rabbi of the generation, right? He was also the Nasi, right? He was a president also. Big man, right? So, right? So he tells Rabbi, you see, right? These women were not embarrassed, by the way, to tell the rabbis these things. Not like today, Today the women are so embarrassed, They don't tell the rabbi, oh, I'm embarrassed to tell him, Yeah, when you're embarrassed, the problem is you're going to come to do sin, So it's better to tell the rabbi, ask him the question. Don't be ashamed. You know what I mean? Don't be bashful, bashful. I don't want to say those words. Yeah, okay. So what's going to happen? You're going to come to do sin. That's better for you? You have to learn from there, something. Also, I have to tell you.
I do have a question. So where do we draw the line between, shame and in this case, meaning the good shame and the evil shame, meaning the shame that is going to lead us to sin and the shame that is going to make us, be modest and not so great.
So when it comes to asking questions in halakha, you have to be frank, with the rabbi, straight. Don't play games, don't say, oh, I'm embarrassed to tell him, he won't understand me, the rabbi, he's too holy to understand those things. Yeah, if you're gonna think like that, you're gonna come to do sins, that's what's gonna happen. You know what I mean? That's not the proper approach. I want to tell you also something which is related to that, which is very important to understand. Because when you get married, whatever, right? You're gonna be going to the mikveh, every month, right? If you're still, having periods, right? Whatever. And so what's going to be is, you're going to need a rabbi there, to involved in this whole thing. Why is that? Because when you have your period, and what happens is, right, that sometimes, after your period is over, okay, and you're counting the clean days, right? Let me just, I'm sorry, there's a. I have to get the door. Just give me a second. So, as we were saying, right, the thing is that, sometimes what happens is that after the period is over, you're counting 7 clean days afterwards, to go to the mikveh. So what happens is that sometimes the lady, sees some blood during those 7 clean days, some kind of a color, coming out of her body, right? So, if she's not sure if the color is clean or not clean, she has to show it to a rabbi. You know what I mean? So, she shouldn't be ashamed to do that.
Rabbi, and I think it is to my understanding because sometimes when people want to conceive and they get all these stains, they gotta show it to the rabbi so the rabbi could say, oh, this is okay and it is normal, right?
Right. It's not a matter of conception, though. It's just a matter of cleanliness, right? In other words, being clean, being pure, that's the thing, which also is related to that, of course, conception, right? One is related to the other. So, okay, so it's all one big thing, But anyway, the point is that there are some people, unfortunately, they are embarrassed, to show these things to the rabbis. In Israel, Baruch Hashem, it's better there because the ladies know what to do. They're more clever. But here, in America, like you barely have any woman, who takes these things to a rabbi. Like because they're ashamed, they're afraid. Okay, at least if you're ashamed, give it to your husband. Let your husband take it. You know what I mean? Get your husband involved. If you're ashamed to go there, so okay, fine. But they don't even do that, right? They don't even give it to the husband. So then what happens is, they're going to come to sin because of the shame that they have. This is no good.
Is
So,
the rabbi looking for color, or is he looking for amount?
Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Just give me 1 second. I have a delivery here. Okay, sorry about that. So we're done. So anyway, as we said, I actually had one person, who asked me questions, sometimes, but when it comes to his wife, he was embarrassed, to ask questions about these things. So I kind of tried to convince him, to come clean, as they say, right? So at least, he agreed to show me these colors, on the computer, whatever, on the phone, to take a picture of it. At least that much we did, At least I was able to convince him to do that. It would have been better if he came in person, because really you're supposed to see it in person. But if there's no choice, right, you're allowed to see it in a picture, or whatever. So at least we did that much. But what I noticed also, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just want to say this. What I noticed also is that what do you call it? They had a rabbi who was doing this for them, and this rabbi was totally ignorant. He didn't know what he was doing. And he was telling them all kinds of things which are all false, I told him, I said, you better get a new rabbi, my friend. Like, this guy doesn't know anything about this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is the colors that you're looking for not the amount of blood?
That also, the size also does make a difference, yes. Depending on the case, the size, the color, all kinds of things, right? There's all kinds of factors going in there.
Rabbi, I also read somewhere that sometimes women, their periods don't stop, so they still go to the rabbi, and the rabbi makes a decision. I believe on that too.
Right. So it's not, yeah. So if it doesn't stop, she has to go to the doctor, take some medicine. That's what she has to do, in order that it should stop, because there are some medicines for that. Otherwise, she's going to have a problem. It's a medical problem. It needs to be taken care of. So that's a different discussion, right? We'll discuss that some other time. But right, that's basically what has to be done. So what I'm telling you is right. Don't be embarrassed, to speak with rabbis about these things. There is there's a Gemara like this. Tell you something really funny. That there's a certain rabbi. I forgot the name of the rabbi. One of the big rabbis in the Talmud. So his daughter is getting married. So you know what I mean. So what does he do? This rabbi. He sits down with his daughter, has a sit down with her, and teaches her how to have sex with her husband. Can you imagine? The father, taught, not physically taught her, but described to her what to do. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to do that. These in the old days they didn't know how to do sex. Like they had no idea. They were all like very, they were virgins, uninformed, whatever, right? So that's the way it was. Nowadays, okay, everybody pretty much knows what to do, but in those days they didn't know what to do, right? Whatever. And also there are mistakes people make also today. So right, that's the way it was in those days. And also there's another thing, which is that, as I mentioned one time, there's also a couple of stories in the Talmud that the rabbi would have relations with his wife. I mean, on the bed, on their bed. And there would be a Talmid, one of the disciples, who would go under the bed and listen to what they're doing, to learn the halakha. Can you imagine? They did this too. And one time, it says in Gemara that, the rabbi noticed that he was there, under the bed. So then, right, he asked him, like, what are you doing down there? What are you doing? You're a voyeur? What are you? Tells him. So it tells him, no, it says, Rabbi, I'm just trying to learn the halakha. So there you go, right? So it's really funny. It's really funny. Okay, right. So you get the point. Okay, so any questions before we go? Okay, I guess I've shocked you enough. There's no more I shocked you out of the questions. Okay, so here we go, right? Let's go on. Let's go further here. So, okay, as we're getting back to the story, right? So this lady comes to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. She's not embarrassed, right, to tell him the truth. So she tells the rabbi, he says, says, I wanted to have normal relations with my, normal sex with my husband. You know what I mean? In other words, I went into the, missionary position, right? Classic, sex, right? No funky stuff. No fancy stuff. Missionary, right? Yeah. So, he tells the rabbi, you know what he did? He says, he turned me around, and he did me anal instead, Complaining to the rabbi. Can you imagine? So, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right? Okay, here's the complaint, right? Complaint. So, what is he going to do now? Bring the guy to the bed then, have him flogged? So, he tells him, he says, right? Let's read this, right? We'll see what it says here. So he tells him, and so the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi answered her, right? Says, what can I do? He says, the Torah allowed you to your husband the way he wants you, So if that's the way he wanted you, what can we do, right? That's the way it goes, Take it in stride. Okay. So right, so you see from this story, apparently it is allowed to have anal intercourse. Otherwise, how did this rabbi, right, this great rabbi, how did he tell her like that? So there's a contradiction here going on, right? In one place we're saying don't do it. In another place we're saying it's allowed to do it. The husband can do whatever he wants, right? Let him be in the driver's seat. Let him drive. Sit back and let him drive. So okay, you get the point, right? So right? So he says, but look what he says, right? According to Tosfot and Rosh, there's one answer here, right? Which is that he had anal intercourse with her, but he didn't ejaculate there. That's the first answer. So therefore it's allowed without ejaculation, right? Because then you're not wasting seed. Then it's not like ערב ענן. ועוד אומר לי, דלא חשיב כמעשה ערב ענן, אלא כמה שמתכוון להשחית את הזרע והרגיל לעשות כן. So then Ri gives a different answer, right, over there in Tosfot. So Tosfot has two different answers. Right? The second answer of the Tosfot, according to the Ri, is that, yeah, okay, once in a while you can do it. Like anal intercourse, even if you ejaculate there, because you're not intending to waste your seed, it's just, you just want to, right, fulfill your desire, right, whatever. So as long as you don't do it all the time, like that, don't become accustomed to it. Once in a while, right, once in a blue moon, you can do it, right, something like that, right. Don't make a habit out of it, right, every time, because otherwise, how are you going to have children like that, right? What's the point? Okay, right. So these are two answers, right? That it's given in the Tosfot. So Katav Rosh Hashinui Yakar. So says Tosfot, it says the Rosh that the second answer is the good one, right? That's the halacha. So meaning what? That once in a while, right, you can do it, even ejaculate there, and as long as you don't make do it like all the time like that, because we have a desire for this thing, right? And it's not really called like you're wasting your seed because you're not doing it on purpose, blah blah blah. So right, you're not doing it regularly. But as we're gonna see, right, even though the Rosh holds like this approach, we're gonna see that Rambam doesn't hold like that, right? According to Rambam, we're gonna see that he holds that you can never ejaculate, outside, no matter what. So in other words, yes, you can have anal, but don't ejaculate there. That's not allowed, right? We're going to see that in a second. כתב ראש, so it goes on, ולא דקדק לדע אם היה שם הוצאת זרע עלמא בכל עניין שרי, והוא עובדה באקראי, אבל כדמוכח דשנן לשולחן ערוך כתיבו, ואף חולה, אבל הרמב"ם, he brings Rambam, כתב פרק כ"א בהלכות איסורי ביאה, ובלבד שלא יוציא שכבת זרע בטלה, והיינו כתיבת סכמה דרי. So he said the Rambam is going according to the first answer of the Ri, right? In other words, you cannot ejaculate there. So it's a bit of a machloket here between the Rosh and the Rambam. While Tosfot brings both answers, right? They bring both of these answers. Okay, right. So so bottom line, right? What is the halacha, right? So we're going to see it, right, in the Shulchan Aruch, he's going to say there that like the Rambam, basically, right? That you should not ejaculate. But right, I think the Ramah brings the other opinion of the Ri also there. He brings that. So there's a room, to be lenient for a certain, whatever, If a person is really into that stuff, whatever, I guess there's room to be lenient, But the truth is, the Bet Yosef Shulchan Aruch doesn't like it. And he also brings the Zohar, as we're going to see, right? Who says, that that's very bad to ejaculate outside, whatever. And it's considered to be like murder and this and that, all kinds of very severe things. So therefore, in other words, bottom line, right? What's the bottom line with this thing? That a person, who doesn't have a desire for this, anal intercourse, really should avoid it altogether. You'll save yourself a lot of problems. If you try to avoid this altogether, that's right, one thing. But if you're really like, one of these people who likes these things, I've heard from some people, they told me they like it, so, whatever. To each his own, what can I tell you, right? If you're one of those who likes it, by the way, the Gemara says you should know that women don't like it usually. And why is that? Because it's painful for them, that's what it says. So usually, it's the man who wants this stuff. He instigates this kind of thing. Usually, right? Usually it's the guy. What can I tell you? It's much more pleasurable for the woman, to do it the normal way. Usually that's what it is. Because otherwise it's painful. Okay, there's a lot to talk about that, but anyway, right? That's the basic idea. So right now, right, let's get to the issue of the oral sex, right? The oral stuff. And so there, right, the truth is, right, in the Gemara there, Nedarim, there's a machloket. This rabbi, who says he talked with the angels and they gave him some things, they taught him some things about this. So right, the rabbis say, by the way, who are the angels? Well, he spoke with angels. They say that's talking about the rabbis, the holy rabbis. We call them angels, So the rabbis told them these things. There were some big chachamim, who told them these things. But then, right, comes the Gemara and says halacha is not like that. Right, so in other words, right, over here we also have a machloket, regarding oral sex as well. The Rambam does allow it. On the other hand, we have the Ravad, right, as we said, who's very stringent about that, as we already read. So therefore, a person can rely on the Rambam again, right? If he has a desire for these things, no problem, he can rely on that. But if he does not, and he's just one of those, clean cut guys, right? Just like to do everything straight. No fancy stuff. He doesn't like fancy stuff. He goes straight in, does his job, and finishes. That's it, right? So if he's one of those guys like that, there's no reason to get involved with these things. You know what I mean? Because you're getting into a machloket, and there are some dangers involved, as we said, right? So it's better to avoid it, unless you have a desire for these things. Then it's okay. It's all right. And as we said. So this is basically, the what we're dealing with, when it comes to these things, Okay, so so in other words, basically what we can say is like this, right? That when it comes to the halacha, there is room to allow these things, as we said, right? According to the way we described. But Hasidut, to be saintly, there is a thing to avoid these kinds of things especially if you don't have any desire for these things, So I have a friend, who we studied with in Jerusalem, and he wrote about this issue. He wrote a tshuva about this in his book. So he was lenient about this. He said that especially in our times, Bale tshuva, people are they became religious. They were not religious and things like this, right? And they're used to this kind of lifestyle, the Western, kind of thing. So he says, right, they can do it because otherwise, if they don't, they're going to get frustrated, because they're used to it and that's their method, whatever. It's their lifestyle, it's their culture, whatever. So if they don't do it, it's going to be like for them, they're not going to feel satisfied. So if in case like that, it's better to be lenient, But if you're one of those Jews, born in one of those pristine families, who they're very pure and clean, so you don't need these things, they don't even think about these things, these people. They don't talk about it. They don't think about it. It's not in their itinerary at all. That's what it is, So therefore, right, if you're one of those, then you were better off avoiding it. That's what we're saying, right? Okay, very good. So Bezat Hashem, let's see what we got here. Okay, we still have some more to do, so we'll continue Bezat Hashem next time. But let me see, let me just see here. Yeah, okay, so we'll continue Bezat Hashem next week. We still have a lot more to discuss, right? We can finish this in about, let's say, the whole chapter in about 2 weeks, Then we'll go on to something else. So anyway, Bezat Hashem, thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov. We'll see you next week. Shabbat Shalom. And we'll see you Sunday, Bezat Hashem. We're coming close. We're coming close to Rosh Chodesh Elul, which is the time of tshuva, right? So we got to do tshuva. We got to get ready for tshuva. All right, very good. So, Laila Tov.
Kabbalah, thank you so much.
God bless. God bless. All the best.
Thank you.